Some of the highlights we'll be looking at in this program. Justin Trudeau has resigned, yes, but his economic track record, well, you have real estate, manufacturing, and mining, key drivers of that country's economy, they have underperformed. That is part of the legacy that he has left behind. Then here's another legacy that we're looking at, and that is the cost of living crisis. It seems like everything is expensive in Canada, from gas to groceries to most definitely homes, and that's an alarm bell that should be going off for the construction sector. And then we come to one of the most recent developments of Canada, and that is the incoming US President Donald Trump, whose threats of annexation takes this to another level. Yet it could be economic posturing prior to any tariff increase decisions. We'll be discussing all of that and more with our guest. We have Dr. Quan Le, advisor at Rising Tide Foundation. We also have Dimitri Laskaris, who's a geopolitical commentator.
It's about deindustrialization and depopulation. Because as you know, the green ambitions are not ambitions at all, but the country of ambitions, I would say the green destruction. Everything that has been used under the banner of green economy in reality has been done as a narrative for deindustrialization. Expanded government spending is only for printing more money, but without necessarily the industrial apparatus that is the result normally in the healthy economy of that government spending, okay? Because most of the money has been recuperated by the 1% for buying back their stock exchanges and for increasing their value in the stock exchanges. By industrial economy, I mean the economy that would produce things, okay, that would produce machines, that would produce food, that would produce real things and not imaginary, let's say, monetary bubble.
The points that Quan Le makes are valid, but we need to really look at some harder details when it comes to Canada and its economy. First of all, the fact that Canada has been in the throes of the pandemic, still suffering from it when it's 3 years ago that occurred. I mean, it has an economic crisis that's categorized by things like increased federal debt and also, of course, government spending, which adds to the deficit. Now, some of the signs of this economic crisis, we can take a look at two in particular. One is declining productivity, and the other, per capita GDP. Also deteriorating living standards, can't forget that, which included significant levels of poverty, inflation, violent crime rates, and a high cost of living.
If a government is doing everything in the sense of promoting the FIRE economy, okay, finance, insurance, and real estate economy instead of an industrial economy, meaning an economy that would create manufacturing jobs for people, well, it is not a surprise that after 9 years, in large part, will reflect mounting discontent because most of the people would not have access to a manufacturing job, or let's say a real job, and because the money that has been printed goes up to the 1%, it's not trickled down but going up, because of the inflation consequent to the printing of money, or expanded government spending, which is part of the printing of money. Inflation is an inevitable consequence. So, of course, the people not having secure and stable job and paying jobs, and plus the inflation, plus the weak economic growth, which is another way to say the same thing. What do you expect other than discontent? It's simply normal.
Time for the social media posts, and these are the ones that we picked. First off, the Canadian nightmare continues as per capita GDP shrinks for the sixth straight quarter. Incomes are now a third lower than the U.S. 15 years ago, we were even. 9 years of Justin Trudeau has delivered West Virginia salaries, San Francisco home prices, and El Paso levels of migrants.
Canada's Justin Trudeau nightmare continues. In case you think Joe Biden is bad, spare a thought for our cousins to the north. Last week, Statistics Canada announced that Canada's per capita GDP has shrunk for the sixth consecutive quarter, despite jumps in government spending that continue the Sovietization of the Canadian economy, courtesy of Canada's most famous cosplayer, Justin Trudeau.
Now, Canada looks quite bad here. Huge levels of private debt, refinancings coming, floating rate mortgages already biting consumers. If you discount for mass immigration, employment rates are declining fast. Then Canada is in trouble. This is the 9th budget in a row that depends heavily on excessive borrowed money managed by an beastly bloated federal bureaucracy that is now 40% larger and 68% more costly than when the Liberals took power in the year 2015.
Any discussion about immigration in Canada or the United States needs to take into account one simple historical fact, and that is that the vast majority of the population in both of these countries are either immigrants or the descendants of immigrants. The only people in Canada and the United States who are not immigrants or the descendants of immigrants are the Indigenous peoples. In Canada, they constitute 4% of the population. Before European colonials invaded what is now Canada and the United States, they constituted 100% of the population. The people in this country and in the United States who are constantly complaining about immigration consistently failed to acknowledge that they themselves or their ancestors benefited from immigration and also benefited from a genocide, which is exactly what the Europeans did to the indigenous peoples of these two countries.
Well, let's look at some more facts when it comes to what our guests have said. Canadians have time and again compared the economy to that of the U.S., and that's what we're doing in this box here. Well, the snapshot is one way of looking at it, although the premise is wrong since the two economies vary greatly. Average increase in Canadians' annual incomes is what we've looked at here, where the Americans are earning $6,200 more per year. Now, what's interesting here is this is while Canadians, well, they earned actually $4,000 more than the Americans back in the 1980s.
There has absolutely been a dramatic increase in the cost of living, and it's imposed very significant hardship on Canadians. And, no one really wants to talk about the main causes of inflation in this country and in the West generally. There's been a much higher degree over years of concentration of economic power in a few hands. So rather than having, for example, 20 companies that are competing in some particular industrial sector, we now have 2 or 3 because our government allowed the big players in industries right across the economy to acquire their competitors, and now you have effectively quasi-monopolistic pricing. If we're not going to deal with the problem of, monopolies and quasi-monopolies in our economy, we're not going to bring down inflation on a sustainable basis.
This is the InfoNews section of the program. First up, this is a great topic actually. It's about rare earth supply. And when it comes to that, the U.S. Incoming President Donald Trump has talked of a trade war with China. And because of that, there are fears now rising for rare earths supply. And guess where that's going to be coming from? Well, Beijing is the one that dominates the production of critical elements, ones that are used in the production of electronics, vehicles, and weapons. Now, we are taking a look at this in a broader sense where it's an underreported topic when it comes to rare earths. In terms of the Chinese control, well, you have production and you have processing. Look at the percentages, 70% for production, and for the processing, 90% under Chinese control. So that is obviously a very dominant player when it comes to rare earths. And this includes 17 elements. Things like smartphones, F-35 fighter jets, radar systems, semiconductors, drones, nuclear reactors, EV batteries, wind turbines. Obviously, you can see that these are very key when it comes to other countries and the role that China plays when it comes to its domineering position for rare earths. Next up, a topic that has still caught the attention of the world, really, and that's Syria and its economy in particular. Rebuilding that economy is key for stability. And the question that's posed in this century, can stability return after the war? Syria's new leadership is facing an economy devastated by war and sanctions, with inflation and a decimated currency. Went on to say that an immediate priority is funding, including the basics. 13.1 million do not have enough to eat. And peace and security, obviously those are also very important issues. Next, a comparison that may catch some by surprise. Cocoa versus Bitcoin. Yes, cocoa bean beats Bitcoin. Bloomberg has actually named the chocolate's main ingredient the best performing commodity of the year 2024. Now, the gains of Bitcoin, it said, fall pale in comparison, which have gained nearly 128%, rising from just over $41,000 per coin in early January to a peak of $106,500 in mid-December. Those were the topics we picked for our InfoNews section. Any topics that you have with an economic flavor, please do send them to us. Contact information is coming up. This is the in-depth section of the program. Canada's economy, on paper, is the 10th largest economy in the world. Well, if that is the case, then why is the economy sputtering and not yielding economic results that support that fact? Well, Canada is plagued by not making products anymore, and that's what we're going to take a look at. When it comes to production, output decrease is what is plaguing it, along with more workers who are producing the same. So that means the same output. Now we move on to construction. In that terms, it is drawing in more resources. The economic landscape has shifted from oil and gas to construction. But construction productivity remains at a 3-year low. And then Canada's service sector, well, that has fallen behind the U.S. One reason is that Canada has not embraced new technologies. Let's move on to other segments that point towards that, but policies that can boost production. There are ways that it could be done, like tax reform. Simplifying the tax code or reducing tax rates for investment is one way. In terms of construction, Well, breaking down barriers and smarter regulation can help the industry. Also, when we take a look at investment, well, investment will require the same. In other words, breaking down barriers, just like construction, or eliminating them, while promoting labor mobility and transparency. So those are the ways that the economy, at least based on the angles we presented, can improve. Let's bring back our guest and see what he thinks. Can Lee rejoins us. Can Lee, welcome back to Economic Divide. As Canada is preparing for what is the incoming U.S. President Donald Trump, the threat is issued by him in terms of an annexation of Canada, but more importantly in terms of tariffs, and that he's going to increase the rates. What do you think about that? How far, first of all, is he going to go through with his threats, which could even entail elimination of some goods from Canada?
So first, only economic power would be enough to submit Canada. I don't know to what extent Donald Trump truly wants to make Canada the 51st state of the U.S., because I don't think that the U.S. needs the lands of Canada. But what the U.S. needs, however, is the oil, the gas, and the natural resources or commodities from Canada. So will he go as far as to eliminate the imported goods from Canada? Yes, I think that at the economic level, he will do everything to submit Canada, because once again, and now I want to expand a little bit my answer. Let's not forget that the U.S. is an imperialist state, okay? And most of the Americans are not responsible for that imperialist state, of course. It's the infamous 1%, the plutocratic oligarchy, or even the kakistocratic oligarchy, who is responsible for that imperialist attitude across the world.
All right, thank you for that. We do appreciate it, but we have to take a look at other aspects here when it comes to Canada's economy. Let's take a look at this particular graph where Canada's productivity performance is what is the key focus here. And this is important when it comes to the real output per hour worked and the annual average percent change. You can see from the years 1989 is where we started up to the years 2023. And we took a decade for each in terms of the annual average percent change. Obviously, 1989 to 1999 had the highest, and when it came to the year 2019 through 2023, well, it nosedived. And that is something that points not only towards the pandemic being a cause of it, but also the fact that you have productivity to have decreased because manufacturing is not up to the levels that it was before the year between 2019 and 2023. And finally, we have mentioned that Canadians are experiencing a cost of living crisis. These are some of the things that they're suffering from. We picked three. Groceries, for example, 5.7% is what we're looking at there in terms of housing. That's a big one, 17.7%. And then gas, 33.3%. The price increases under Trudeau and his Liberals Party. This was a snapshot of December 20 to December 20, that is through December 2021. Don't take our word for what Canada is experiencing and what Canadians are experiencing. Let's take a look at a Canadian and see what she had to say about the cost of living crisis.
I just found out that the city that I live in, that I was born, raised, grew up in, is now the third most expensive city in the entire world. I live in Canada. You hear cities like New York being the most expensive. It's known to be the most expensive. But you know something is wrong when you live in Canada and they say, oh, you have freedom, you have this, you have that. But we're just living to work here. There's no enjoyment. If you just want to have an impromptu fun brunch or go out with your friends once in a while, you have to plan it. You can't just go out anymore. You have to actually plan and budget it into your money or you will be in debt.
All right, so you heard her firsthand there. Let's see what our guest thinks. Dimitri rejoins us. Dimitri Lascaris is an analyst when it comes to politics, and he's also a journalist and a lawyer. Dimitri Lascaris, welcome back. Canada is marred by some negative economic indicators, which is not obviously a good sign in terms of what Trudeau has left behind. But this threat issued by Donald Trump in terms of the annexation perhaps is not as important as what Trump is going to do, most likely, many have said, and that is the rate increases in terms of tariffs. Do you think he's going to go through with the tariffs? How much? And even if it means elimination of some goods from Canada?
Well, again, there's an air of unreality to these discussions in Canada. To a large extent, Canada already is the 51st state of the United States. Canada's largest trading partner is the United States. It accounts for a large majority of Canada's trade. The converse is not true. Canadian trade is not nearly as important to the United States as trade with the U.S. is to Canada, and so that puts Canada in a position of economic dependency. I've been saying for years that Canada should be diversifying its trade relationships and not be so dependent upon the United States. But successive conservative and liberal governments went to the opposite direction. They made Canada even more dependent on trade. Another way in which Canada is already a 51st state is that Canadians are largely, for want of a better word, brainwashed by American propaganda. We're constantly subjected to it in this country. You see it on the televisions. You see it in the movie theaters. You see it when you're in public transport. The advertisements of these American corporations. And, a large proportion of the vast majority of the Canadian population lives within 100 miles of the U.S. border. And they're constantly interacting with Americans and with the American media ecosystem. And this has caused them to think in ways that are very American, unfortunately.
All right, thank you very much for that, Dimitri Lascaris there. Well, when we have talked about this annexation threat coming from Donald Trump, it's important to get an idea from Canadians. We need to incorporate their thoughts into this and see what they think. Here's just a couple Canadians and what they think about the threat that has been issued against our country.
I feel that it's ridiculous. Him even suggesting such a thing is ridiculous, and it's never going to happen. And if Trump decides to impose any kind of economic tariffs, Canada does have a stance to, in turn, impose the same tariffs, and then it'll just end up being some sort of tariff war.
It sounds like a bullying for me, because you just cannot take a country by this way. I can see majority of the Canadians, they are pretty left. So I don't think they will agree with Trump's idea.